Conflict is a part of all existence and can't be avoided. But it can be managed such that it makes us better versions of ourselves. Which is why, for me, understanding how to resolve and manage conflicts in an emotionally intelligent manner, yes, I'm still on the topic emotional intelligence, is super important. And with me to hopefully simplify how to do this is Fola Alade, an emotional intelligence practitioner who specializes in the synergy between EQ and conflict management. Fola Alade is a notary public and an accredited attorney-mediator based in Lagos. He's the founder, principal partner at Fortifa Partnerships LP. It's a mediators and mediation advocacy company. He is also a certified emotional intelligence specialist, a facilitator, and a trainer. Welcome, Fola. It's really cool to have you here with me today.
Super excited to be here with you too.
Yeah, I love your filler. It's very, very colorful. Very nice.
Thank you so much.
Cool. So, emotional intelligence and conflict resolution and management.
Yes, it is.
First thing is, what is conflict resolution and management?
Okay, so I'm going to try to be as simplistic as possible. So conflict resolution and management really has to do with the process through which conflict is managed. So that is me just picking out the words in there. Yeah. Yes. It basically has to do with how conflict is managed. The certain processes and procedures that are in place towards having disputes resolved amicably, essentially.
Okay, what do you mean by processes and procedures in place?
Okay, so I'm going to have to piggyback a bit.
Yeah.
So conflict, first of all, is innate. We all have conflict in us. And if we're going to trace conflict back to mankind, conflict is as old as mankind. Are we talking about the first conflict God had with Lucifer? Are we talking about the conflict between God and Adam? Are we talking about conflict between communities and all of that? So
and even personal conflict.
Yeah. So the idea of conflict is almost like a one-size-fits-all. So essentially, depending on where we're looking at it from and the angle we're coming at it from, each has a particular way of having a conflict resolved. So I'll give an example. A commercial conflict, the parameters of having a commercial conflict resolved is different from having a workplace conflict resolved. It's also different from almost having a personal relationship involved. But at the end of the day, it's still conflict. But depending on where the conflict is, then you now come up with a particular way of having it resolved.
So where does emotional intelligence come into all of this?
That's it. Emotional intelligence really is a fusion of the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you act. Now, the background of it all really we have are human beings, because conflict comes up between human beings. Sorry,
can I ask you to raise your voice a bit more, because I can't really hear what you just said.
Essentially, if you go back and look at the people that are always in conflict, they have to do with human beings essentially. So essentially, what this means is that if we are looking at the concept of human beings, vis-a-vis disputes and all of that, there's a certain procedure involved between having them resolve those conflicts.
Okay. But to go back to what you said a few seconds ago, it's about the way you think.
No, that emotional intelligence is about the way you think, the way you feel, and the way you act. It's a fusion of those three. Yes, it can also be said to be self-awareness. You being aware of the things you do, the way you feel, and the way you act. So now when you now decide to merge emotional intelligence with conflict, what do they both have in common? They have a person involved. So basically what this has to do is that when someone has emotional intelligence, it helps the person in having disputes resolved amicably. Okay.
So I'm going to backtrack a little. We've been talking about emotional intelligence for the last few weeks. And I'm beginning to ask myself this. Kini, big deal. In English, what is the big deal? Because now that we're talking about conflict management, conflict resolution, and like you said, conflict is as old as time.
Yes, it is.
So my assumption is the emotional intelligence element of it is also as old as time.
Yes, it is.
So why is it such a big deal now?
So why it is a big deal is this. First of all, we really don't have any right or wrong answers. That's one of the basic elements of emotional intelligence. Because the way I perceive something might be different from the way you perceive something. So With someone that has emotional intelligence, the way he is going to interpret a conflict might be different from the way somebody else would interpret a conflict. So why emotional?
But they could both be right
in
their interpretations.
Yes, that's the thing. So there are really no wrong answers. So if a conflict abounds between two people, someone with emotional intelligence can say, okay, yeah, maybe the issue has to do with disparity in shared values. It might be because there's an element of miscommunication.
Okay.
But someone who does not have a relative amount of emotional intelligence can look at that conflict and be like, maybe this person is trying to be fraudulent. Maybe this person is trying to take advantage of me. But it doesn't change the element of the conflict.
Yes.
So what has basically come into place is the interpretation both parties have given to that element of conflict.
I see.
Exactly. And that is why if you look at, sometimes people say, okay, conflict really comes up when there is, when people give a different, when there's opposition in values, needs, and interest. People don't have, and yes, people look at conflict and be like, okay, fine. What really is the intention behind what is going on? Is this person basically trying to take advantage of me? Is this person basically trying to do X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z? But when you now infuse emotional intelligence into it, you now look at the conflict and ask yourself one question: what really is the intention behind this? Is this going on because is this going on because the person does not have a proper understanding of what it is? Is this going on because I probably did not communicate the essence of what I'm trying to explain to the person too? Which is why one of the foundations of the synergy of emotional intelligence and conflict is communication. Yes, the ability to explain to the person that, okay, fine, what is going on might not be the way you're looking at it. Can we also have another way of looking at it to see whether we'll both get to the desired venue we want to get to?
I see. So it's about being mindful.
Let's start off with being self-aware.
Being self-aware.
Yes. Then now being mindful. Yes.
That's actually what you just said about the communication part is actually quite key, because it's quite important. And it now takes me to, what if the conflict is between you and yourself, which is, in my opinion, one of the biggest types of conflicts there is. I may be totally wrong.
So I stumbled upon this Japanese proverb a while back, and he said, it was between a scholar and his mentee, and he said that in everybody there are we have two rules in you. You have that, you have good, you have evil, you have positive, you have negative. They're always in constant battle with each other. Then the child now asked the scholar, so who wins the battle eventually? And the scholar said, it's the one you feed.
I see.
So it's the one you feed. So what that essentially means is that, okay, fine. In every person, who are you giving more priority to? So now, I think I would rather use the concept of negativity and positivity.
Okay.
So now, in negativity, you see things abound. You're always looking at the negative side of life. You don't see anything positive about it. So definitely, when there's a constant, so definitely your outlook to life will be negative.
Yes.
But on the other side, if the same life we're talking about, you keep seeing the positive side of it, you look at the bright skies, you look at all that. So at the end of the day, the positive side will always be stronger than the negative side. So that in itself is conflict. That in itself is conflict. So you now ask yourself one question. So who then really wins, quote unquote, that battle? It is the one you feed the most. It is your interpretation of issues that determines which one would supersede the other.
And how does emotional intelligence help you to decide which one to feed, or what your interpretation of issues should be? First
of all, people do the best with what they can. If they know better, they will do better. That's one of the sayings of my coach. He likes that saying so much. So how does emotional intelligence come into place here? First of all, we look at the principle of self-awareness. We first of all have an understanding of the fact that there are really no right or wrong answers. So if an issue comes up, you can look at the issue as, okay, fine. When this comes up, is there a lesson to be learned from it? What is this trying to teach me? So basically, what emotional intelligence does to you is that it gives you a broader perspective, a broader understanding of things. So the way you essentially explain some things determines how the things look like. So if at the end of the day you explain it from a positive side of from the positive point of view, you have a positive outlook to it.
True.
If you give a negative interpretation to it, you have a negative outlook to it. So that is basically where emotional intelligence. It doesn't change the fact that that thing is still what it is. But it is your interpretation. It is the meaning you give to it that invariably determines whether you feel that thing is positive or whether you feel it is negative.
And is there a difference between workplace conflict and relationship conflict? Are they managed? Is there a difference, and are they treated differently?
So now, both of them actually conflict. The only difference is where they actually abound in. Now, when it comes to workplace conflict, these are disputes actually happening in more professional areas, like in the workplace and everything. Now, when you now look at the other kind of conflict, that one is more personal. It's more. It usually comes up probably between husbands and wives, friends, and all of that. So, what makes workplace different from the
personal, the relationship,
personal, basically has to do within where it happens. So one is in a professional setting, one is in a workplace. The other most times has to do with interpersonal relationships you have probably with your family, with your friends, and all of that.
But doesn't the fact that one is in the workplace means that there are already preset parameters to help curb how the conflict happens, evolves, and is managed, whereas in personal conflicts, because there's the assumption of this is your vulnerable space, you don't necessarily have those preset parameters.
Okay, let me start from personal relationship and personal conflict. Now, people are friends because they have shared values.
Yes.
Yes. Now, but in a workplace, and that is why in personal relationships you find people using terms like "he's my friend." Yeah. But in a workplace, what you have them using words like "he's a colleague." So essentially, something brings both of you together. That is the workplace. You're both in that organization to achieve something. Now, the organization has rules, has regulations. They have core values that are supposed to guide employees towards achieving a set goal. So what that invariably means is that we don't have to like each other to get the job done. We can have mutual respect for each other to have something done. But it's a bit different when it comes to interpersonal personal, because we will be friends if we have shared values. We will be friends if we have certain things in common. Well, so in a way, it's almost alike, but you just have one or two differences in place. Yes, because one happens in a more professional setting. The other happens in interpersonal with people. Yeah.
So is it the way in which you resolve and manage conflicts when they arise in these different settings? Are they the same? Because from what you said, I suspect they're not.
Well, they are not actually. They are not, because if we're going to look at if any dispute comes up in a workplace conflict, you have to first of all find out what the issues are. Now, the issues, does it have to do with does it have to do with you having an issue with your line manager? Does it have to do with the workplace environment? Does it have to do with the concept of maybe unfair treatment, maybe bullying, maybe set deliverables and all of that? But you see, the concept of it is always within that workplace environment. But in personal relationships, it could probably be because you have a problem with the way I talk to you. It's more personal than the other one. So the parameters of a workplace conflict has certain things in place that personal relationships don't. But at the end of the day, they are both still conflict, but the way and manner you will deal with a personal relationship will be slightly different from how you deal with a workplace conflict.
Okay, let me be potentially slightly controversial.
Okay.
There is something my mom used to say to me a lot. If you wouldn't talk to your colleague at work like that, don't talk to the people in your personal life like that. you've just said that the parameters are different.
Slightly different, yeah.
But why can't you take the workplace learnings on how to, manage relationships and handle conflicts and use them in a personal setting to hopefully become, better? Why,
Okay, now, if we're going to use the analogy you put into place, now we can look at it from the angle of having an understanding of where that person is coming from. At the end of the day, we are products of our environment. Mm-hmm. So even when we go into the workplace, sometimes we tend to carry some of our luggages into the workplace. So in a way, there is some kind of similarity, but at the end of the day, it's not always how it is.
Okay. So what are the strategies? Strategies for managing conflict in the workplace and the strategies for managing conflict in your personal relationship.
Now, for strategies for managing conflict in the workplace, it's first of all important to identify what the issues in contention are. Mm-hmm. Yes. Now, when it also comes to managing issues in personal relationships, you can actually identify what the issues in contention are. Mm-hmm. But it's not. You would find that most times, the issues are always a bit more personal than that of the workplace.
Yes, but then so the reason why I'm drawing a parallel between the two is I want us to look at where the similarities are. Mm-hmm. Because I think sometimes we overcomplicate this thing for ourselves. Workplace, you have to identify the issues. Personal life, you have to identify the issues. What are the other steps that you would need to take in each scenario? And what are the commonalities? Okay, now, when it comes to that of the workplace, some of the issues you have to look at again has to do with... So I could take that question again. So we've got personal conflict and we've got workplace conflict. Mm-hmm. Yes, there are strategies for managing conflicts in both situations. Yeah. What are those strategies? I want to see if there are any commonalities between the two. So So it's a simpler way of handling conflict, really. I don't know. In my opinion. Yeah, I totally agree with you. So now, for some of the strategies that are involved in managing workplace conflicts, some of the things you will look at really, like I said, we'll look at the issues in contention. Mm-hmm. We'll try to see what has really caused that misunderstanding. Mm-hmm. Yes. Then, and when it now comes to personal too, you also try to also look at those two and see whether there's a linking force between both of them. So once you've looked at the situation, you've looked at what's caused the misunderstanding, what is the next thing? What is the next step? Okay, you now know what's caused it. What next? They now try to find an amicable way of having those issues resolved. Yes. What if there's no amicable way? Now, most times if there is no amicable way, then you now have what is called almost like a deadlock. Mm-hmm. So when you have like a deadlock, then you now try and figure out a way of making parties see that, look, you need to be able to look beyond the bigger picture of this. You need to be able to see that these issues in contention are not really as bad as you think they are. Mm-hmm. And also, this is also where emotional intelligence also comes into play. That's where I was going. So emotional intelligence also comes into play because you see, when parties don't have an understanding of what the issues in contention are, it is always a bit difficult for them to be able to move from point A to point B. So most times what we try to do is to get them to be a bit disassociated from those issues. Look at those issues outside it and ask yourself this question. But how can you be disassociated if you are inside the conflict? Now, it also has to do with some of the questions you ask. Okay. Yeah, you ask certain questions. Okay, fine. Now, I'll give a typical example. Maybe a workplace conflict has come up as a result of bullying and all of that. There are certain questions you could ask. So, why do you think your boss, why do you think you are being treated unfairly? What XYZ? What if you decided to have a look at it from a different point of view? Do you think this is what it is? Have you tried to have this kind of have you tried to communicate with your boss? What steps have you taken? No, because sometimes what happens is that when issues are bound, it's always like this. People think it's right up in their face.
But most times when you try to take that dispute off like this, they look at it left, they look at it right, they look up and down, and just try to say, okay, fine, maybe what I think is a problem is actually not a problem at all. Exactly.
Okay, I understand that. Taking it back to personal life, you can do the exact same thing you've just outlined in your personal life as well. But then the challenge is, even if you step away from it, you are still coming back to that interaction. And the other person might not be aligned with you. So no matter how emotionally intelligent you are, if there's a lack of alignment, won't you still be back at school? Won't you still have the same problem of not being able to resolve that conflict?
But then again, you now ask yourself one question within the parameters of a personal conflict. How self-aware are you to even have an understanding of the fact that, okay, fine, what this issue in contention is it the way I think it is? The other party having a look at it, is it what the other party thinks it is? So these are certain parameters that actually come into place with it.
How then do you become, if you ask yourself that question, how self-aware are you, and say perchance you can't answer the question, what then?
So now this is also where the role of the emotional intelligence specialist comes into place. And let's also understand that when it comes to personal relationships and disputes arise, if you don't have someone to be able to put those issues in proper perspective, the kind of interpretation you will give to it will be different. Now, I'm looking at these two scenarios from the angle of two people who are already in conflict with each other. Now, you don't have a third party who is not in that bubble having a look at it. So when you don't have someone like an attorney, you have someone like an emotional intelligence specialist who is not in that bubble and is able to ask parties certain pertinent questions to trigger certain kinds of thoughts, to be like, okay, fine. Now, have you considered looking at XYZ? Because you see, most times when issues are bound, parties can't even identify what those issues are. They just know that there's a certain problem in place. Now, if one of the parties is emotionally intelligent, the other party can say, okay, fine. Could there be a possibility that what is causing this problem is not what I think it is? Now, if the other party is not also, if both parties don't have that level of emotional intelligence, and they probably now bring in a third party neutral to come into place, what he can do with his own knowledge of emotional intelligence is to be able to explain to parties that, look, have you guys considered looking at it from this particular angle to try and see whether what you think is the problem isn't the problem?
But that kind of contravenes our African culture, which is, because again, let me even go to in a marriage setting.
Okay.
That African culture where it says never bring a third party into your marriage, never talk to anybody about your problems, sort it out between yourselves. From what you're saying, that doesn't work.
So this also goes back to what I was trying to explain to you about conflict. You see, there is really no one-size-fits-all approach to all of this. Now, let's not forget that what we're trying to look at is an infusion of emotional intelligence into the scheme of things. Now, essentially, all you need might be just one party having that level of emotional intelligence. So, but the point is that when both parties are looking at the same issue from the same point of view, how will one party know that what this thing isn't what he or she thinks it is? Yeah. So the infusion of emotional intelligence into the scheme of things is this. One, you need to first of all have an understanding of what the issues and contention are. But when you don't even have that understanding, and both of you now believe that, okay, we don't want to bring in a third party. We don't want to seek therapy. We don't want to bring in. We don't want to bring in probably a counselor or something. Then how then are you able to really identify or know what the problem is?
But that's what's happening in life. A lot of people are living in marriages that is fraught with conflict, and they've gotten to deadlock positions, and because they've been told don't speak to a third party, and they're not necessarily emotional intelligence as individuals.
Now, but if both parties actually had an understanding of conflict, to know that conflict is innate in man, to understand that, look, conflict basically is in all of us. That we are having issues on conflict, that the fact that there's an opposition in terms of values, needs, and interest does not necessarily mean that when an issue comes up, we both have to go different ways. It should make a lot of difference.
Okay. So can you please give us 3 easy to adopt and implement techniques for using EQ to handle conflicts?
The first is
whether it's at work or it's in your personal life or it's between you, yourself, and you.
The first is self-awareness. That's very, very important. Self-awareness, having an understanding of who you are, having an understanding of what triggers you. Because a lot of times people don't even have that understanding of what triggers them. The second, again, is to also understand the concept of conflict and not see conflict as a virus. Because most times when conflicts abound, some people are conflict averse. You know, they see conflict.
Yeah, I'm uncomfortable with conflict.
Exactly. But then again, when the concept of being uncomfortable with conflict, I always try to make people understand this. If you're not able to have a conversation around it, you know what happens? It begins to pile up. When it piles up, resentment comes into place. So the first, like I mentioned, is having a self-awareness. The second, again, is having an understanding of conflict and not seeing conflict as a virus. Then the third is communication. Now, communication really has to do with so many things make up communication. We have language, we have tonality. So, because it's one thing for you, for there to be a conflict. It's another thing for you to be able to communicate how you feel in terms of how the conflict will be resolved. So the first, self-awareness. Second,
and in that self-awareness, you said know your triggers.
Know your triggers.
Because we hear self-awareness. So
if I'm going to give a simplistic definition to self-awareness is basically knowing yourself, knowing who you are, having an understanding of your kind of person. For someone like me, when at that particular point in time, when there's some kind of trigger, I go quiet. Now, by going quiet does not mean I'm not going to address that issue at a particular point in time. But I'll probably look at, okay, fine, I'm upset, this other person is upset. If I want to communicate how I feel, communicating at that particular point in time may not yield the desired result. Yeah. So, and there's this thing that we're taught, it's called pause. So sometimes I pause. I count to 10. I count to 10 seconds in my mind to be able to give myself this bit of calm. And if I feel the tension is still very high, I don't address that issue there and there. I could come back and address it. But for some people, they want that issue resolved immediately. They want to ventilate their thoughts. They want to say what exactly is on their mind.
So it's not even about right or wrong. It's about know thyself.
Exactly. Yes, it's about knowing thyself. Because really and truly, the concept of human beings have been wonderfully made by God. So you see, and because of that, you really have two people having the same opinion on something. And like I always tell people, that's why when you conduct a survey, sometimes you see some surveys, you never really have 100% in survey. You have sometimes 80%, you have sometimes maybe 70%, and you begin to wonder, why is that so? So for as long as you understand that human beings are different, so that I'm looking at something from this point of view does not invariably mean the other party will look at it from that point of view.
I see.
Yes.
Okay, so know thyself.
Exactly.
Okay, so
yeah. So know thyself. Have an understanding of the conflict, and the third one is being able to communicate. Exactly.
Communicate. So, as always, we come to the end.
Oh wow, so soon.
Yeah.
That so much
I was telling you that it goes by very quickly. Yeah. But I think we've been able to touch on some really important nuggets. And the thing that resonates with me even more strongly is in the few weeks we've been talking about emotional intelligence, the parameters are the same, the principles are the same. It still comes back to self-awareness, knowing yourself. It still comes back to communication, and we don't do enough of that I don't know about other parts of the world, but I don't think we do enough of that in this side of the world because of how we've been raised. So, I really hope we've been able to make impact and change perspectives. That's the ultimate objective. So thank you so much, Fola.
Thank you so much for having me.
It really, really has been good having you here today. You did tell me it was going to be a very interesting conversation, and I'm glad it was. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So we've come to the end of the show, And for me, it's always important that we are able to take something away with us, and hopefully one or a few more people have been able to learn from this. Next week, we will be back here, same time. The show is repeated on Saturday night at, I believe, 9:30 p.m. and again on Sunday morning so Saturday is 10:30 p.m. and Sunday morning is 9:30 a.m. Sorry, I don't have DSTV, so I don't remember. But it's always live on YouTube as well. So please watch the show again. Go to our YouTube channel, watch all the different episodes on emotional intelligence, and we'll see you again next Saturday when we do this again. Thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you.